and welcome back to Influence with Intention. If you're new here, which probably a lot of you are because this is only our second episode, this series is just to remind you and I to use your influence intentionally. When everyone thinks of the word influence, we think of influencer, and that's just not the case because everybody has influence online and offline. And throughout this series, we're just going to touch on topics of how to be a positive influence because your small everyday actions can cause a ripple effect in other people's lives. So last week we chatted briefly about the fact that everybody has influence, not just influencers, literally everybody. It was kind of more of just like a kickstart to get your mind in the right place for 2025 to be like, hey, I do have a positive influence and I should be using that influence to impact my family, my friends, my coworkers, literally anybody you come in contact with. But for this week's episode, we are diving into the power of small acts. When we think of like influence and making an impact, I think we automatically think about only doing something big, grand gesture like donating a ton of money, doing some huge, massive, big project, or like I said, we think of like being an influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers. But something I want to like debunk you from this episode is that not all influence has to be this big, grand gesture. It is these small little moments that make influence so intentional. And most of the time it is those small, minute moments that have the biggest impact on our lives. And for me, I think it's because those small moments really show that someone is being intentional with their time, with their efforts, with you, and that they care about you. This is like the first story I thought of when I was like writing this up. I was like, what is some small thing that happened that I was like, whoa, this person like was so intentional with their time, with paying attention to me. So my siblings and I, there's 5 of us, we do Secret Santa for Christmas. None of us know who has who, like we all pick out of a hat and then we keep it a surprise until Christmas morning and we make like this big scene about like giving our gift to somebody. It's like one of my favorite traditions ever. I made this comment like months and months and months before Christmas, like not even like, oh, I want this type of thing. It was like more of like, oh my gosh, remember this? So I was obsessed with One Direction in middle school, like obsessed. And for, I think it was like a birthday or whatever, I got the One Direction perfume. I never ended up using it, like only like a couple times because my siblings ended up like stealing it and using it all and like whatever. So like we were just talking one day and I was like, oh my gosh, remember that One Direction perfume? Like I loved it. It smelled so good. I wish I'd gotten to use it more. Well, my youngest sister surprised me for my Secret Santa and bought me the One Direction perfume. And when I'm telling you, I opened that box, was sobbing. But to anybody else, they're like probably like, why is she crying over this One Direction perfume? But it was more of the intentional, like she took the time to be like, oh my gosh, I know the perfect gift, hunted down where to find this because they don't sell it anymore. But it's just like little stuff like that, and that's not even like a huge like influence thing. That's just like a being intentional thing. Part of the reason why I wanted to start this series because I am so bad with being intentional. So this is like not just like a lesson for y'all, it's like also like a really big reminder for me that I need to be more intentional, pay more attention to the people that I love. And I just want to say that like being intentional does not have to involve gifts of any sort. I think it really comes down to like the situation and your love language, if giving gifts is your love language, or if the person you are wanting to be intentional with, their love language is receiving gifts. Like I said last week though, I love to use Bible verses to kind of paint the picture, get the overall image, and like bring a little story in to help the message of what I'm trying to say. I'm gonna read this verse off. It's Matthew 25 verse 23, and Jesus says, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. So for context, because it can be kind of confusing if you don't know where it's from, Jesus is telling a parable to his disciples, which is a parable is basically like a story, a lesson to like depict a bigger meaning about what he's trying to say. And in all these parables, Jesus is teaching his disciples the importance of heaven and like preparing them for when he returns. This specific parable where our Bible verse comes from is about a wealthy master and he leaves money for his servants before he goes. I'm gonna read this off because I don't want to screw it up. The first servant received 5 talents, which I think is like their gold or silver. The second servant received 2, and the third received 1. And the master kind of gave them that money to kind of expect them to use their resources wisely when he came back. So the first servant invested the 5 talents and he earned 5 more. The second servant did the same with his 2 talents, so he doubled his amount. The third servant buried his talent in the ground out of fear and just like didn't want to lose it, kind of literally grew it into nothing. The Bible verse that I shared comes from the master returning, calling out his servants and seeing what they did with their talents. So to the first few servants, he said, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. To sum it up, basically what Jesus was saying was that God gives us a few things, a few talents, a few gifts, gives us small moments, and it's up to us to see what we do with those small moments. But I wrote down 4 things that we can learn from this parable that kind of applies to this whole lesson of the power of small acts. The first one, and I'm going to read it off because I don't want to mess them up. The first one is faithfulness with small things. So like I said, this parable highlights being given something small, like small amount of money. For us, that could be time, a little bit of time. It could be giving us a small gift that the world deems small, but God deems big. But no matter what it is all about being faithful and being intentional with what you're given, not complaining, not being scared of it, and using it and doubling it to the best of your ability, telling someone about something. The second lesson is stewardship and accountability. God entrusted each of us with a special gift. A whole nother lesson could be on what your gift is from the Holy Spirit. I love that topic, so I'm gonna write that down actually, and we can do a whole lesson if y'all want. But we are responsible for the gifts that God gives us. God's not gonna puppet control you and be like, oh, I want you to go do this. No, he gives it to us, and it's up to us to listen, obey, and be like, okay, this might be something small that I can use to do this, change somebody's life by doing this. The third lesson is fear versus action. So the third servant, he did everything out of fear. Why? We don't know. He just was scared. So this story kind of encourages us to step out of our fear and use our faith, be intentional, because it is scary sometimes when you have something that you want to do. Like I was scared to start this because I was like, this, I don't know, would people care? It's scary putting yourself out there on the internet every day. But I was like, you know what? It's not about the numbers. It's not about it going viral. It's literally just about, did this help somebody? Because that's the goal. It doesn't matter if it's one person, 100 people, thousands of people. I know my platform's not huge, but God gave me the platform that I have, so I'm gonna do what I can with it because it would be an injustice if I didn't. Same for you. God gave you the platform that you have today. It could be your platform at work. It could be your platform with your friends or your family. Because like I said, everybody has influence. Doesn't matter where in your life you have influence. The final lesson is growth and multiplication. When we invest in what we have, even in like the tiny small ways, God can multiply our efforts and entrust us with more. That's like one of my favorite things about God is that when you pray for patience, you're like, hey God, please give me patience to get through this day. He's not gonna like actually give you patience. He's gonna put you in situations where you are gonna need to be patient. So it's kind of like this. God will entrust you with a gift or money or this position, and it's up to you to use it in the best way possible. So tying this back into how small actions can make a big difference. This is just a reminder that even the small, minute things can have a meaningful impact, can double if it's done intentionally and faithfully. And it's also a great reminder that influence doesn't have to be done out of quantity. Like I said, you don't have to have 1 million followers. You don't have to have the highest position. You don't have to have 1 million friends. It's just being intentional with what you have right now. I love when people leave like takeaways, be like, okay, great, that was a great story, but how can I apply this to my life? Here's some applications. I have 5. These are all small but powerful actions that you can do in your everyday life. Number 1, speak encouragement. Intentionally pay attention to what people tell you that's going on in their life and reach out to them about it. For example, if someone tells you they have like a job interview coming up, reach out a couple days later and be like, hey, how was it? There's truly nothing better than saying something to a group of people and then somebody later on coming and asking you about that. It really just shows you that somebody cared enough to listen. The second one is be present. In this world right now, it is so hard to give someone your full attention when you're thinking about all the things you gotta do, when we have like our social media brain where we're like, oh my gosh, I can only pay attention for 3 seconds and then I gotta move on. Something I've noticed with my boyfriend is that his love language or like feeling loved is attention and like quality time. So whenever I'm with him, I really try to just like put down my phone, or like I'll get all my work done before and be like, okay, this is my time with you. The love languages is like a whole nother topic, which I really want to discuss on here too. In a conversation, give someone your whole attention. And how you do that is by asking questions. So if someone says something, keep asking them questions. Personally, I love to do that because I love hearing all the tea from someone, even if it's just like about their life. And it just shows that the person asking you the questions really does care about what's going on. They're not just like, yeah, like how you doing? Great. That type of thing. The third one is start small habits. I think a great one is anytime you're out in public, complimenting a stranger. It's something that puts us out of our comfort zone, talking to a stranger, and also it's making someone's day. Or another great one is saying people's name. Like say you're ordering something at Starbucks and the barista like has their thing on, say their name, like thank you so much, name. Something I've also been trying to do is to be more intentional with like my followers on TikTok. Is like when someone comments that they like something of mine, or like I love your outfit, like I'll comment back and make sure I say their name. So it's not just like an intentional, like I'm just like, yeah, thanks for like my outfit. Like it's like, oh my gosh, like I so appreciate you, Jessie. I don't know why that name popped in my head, but you know, being intentional and saying their name so they know that they're just not another person on the screen. I'm like, yeah, thanks. And honestly, just these small things, you never know what they can do in someone's life. Like complimenting a stranger in the store. Like when someone compliments my outfit and I'm out and about, I think about it all day. The fourth one, serve quietly. All these small and powerful actions, you don't have to be loud about them. Volunteering for something and not telling anybody. Leaving a note for somebody. Because it's often the unseen acts of services that carry the most weight. And number 5, we live in an internet world, so share positively online. You see so many posts nowadays like commenting on like people's lives. Like the one trending right now is this girl wiping off her wedding makeup like 20 minutes before, and she was like, I don't know all the whole tea about it, but that's just the thing right now. And there's so many people like making videos about it, be like, like there's no need. I think we get so invested in other people's lives that we forget like, hey, this is actually a real person. You don't need to go comment something nasty or like feed into the drama of it all. That is it for this week's lesson, but I really hope it is something encouraging that you can bring into the week. But I have one final question for you to kind of leave you thinking about for the week. I'm gonna read it off. What small intentional act can you do to positively influence someone around you? Feel free to write it down, comment it below. If you want to chat about it, you can also DM me on Instagram. Love to chat. But I hope everybody has the best week. And if you have any topics that you want to discuss, as always, feel free to comment them below. Bye y'all.